What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the lounge. I'm Chris, and if you want an Edison deck that's easy, fun to play, and it's going to make you feel like an anime protagonist while playing it, Gemini Hero might be the deck for you. Gemini Hero is really straightforward to get started with. It's a really simple game plan and rewards you if you like playing the type of game of normal summon set 2 pass and try to make your opponent get over your big guy. And on top of that, you have access to some of the strongest back row in the game and really strong cards like Gemini Spark to just let you outvalue your opponent. Now let's go get our game on. Now, as you can see, the deck list is pretty straightforward. There's not too many tricks involved, but there is a lot of different back row. We're going to get into all the reasons why there's a bunch of different types. But first, we're going to start out with the monsters. We have 3 Neos Alias. This is the Gemini Hero. Neos Alias is basically the main attacker of the deck, the main beat stick, and the kind of main thing you're going to want to find yourself going towards because he activates some of your cards. Not only is he a really big 1900 beat stick, but he also lets you honest him, so he kind of beats over a lot of things by battle. If you find access to your emergency call or your reinforcement of the army that lets you search for a hero card, you could search your deck for Captain Gold, who will get you Skyscraper, meaning that any of your heroes, including Neos Alias, will have a bonus attack boost, basically meaning Neos Alias is 2900 during your turn, so you can beat over almost anything you want. Neos Alias, being a Gemini, also lets you use Gemini Spark on it, which sounds not amazing. You pop your own card and use your Gemini Spark to pop one of their cards and draw a card, so it kind of sounds like it's even. But when you consider that with Gemini Spark, you're probably going to be popping an important back row or a big monster that's going to be more difficult to out for you, it's a really high value card and really insanely impactful. But on top of that, when you then Hero Blast your Neos Alias back to hand, because Gemini monsters count as normal monsters, so you get to use Hero Blast on Neos Alias. Now you're not just popping one card with the Gemini Spark with the Neos Alias, you're not just beating over something by battle with the Neos Alias, whether using your Honest boost or your Skyscraper boost or just killing something because it's big. Now you're also popping another thing with the Hero Blast, so you can kind of like throughout the game make one Neos Alias pop 3 different cards in a way. With Alias in the deck, we have other heroes in the deck that help support them and get your deck going. We have Elemental Hero Ocean. He lets you recycle a hero every turn. He can recycle your Stratos to let you search for another hero or maybe pop some back row, or he can notably recycle your Alias. Speaking of heroes you can recycle with Ocean, we have Elemental Hero Stratos. You're only allowed to play one of him, but he searches your deck for Alias, or if you need Captain Gold to out something, maybe if you need Ocean to recover cards during the next turn, or to make an absolute zero, Stratos is going to be your way to go. He also allows you to out a lot of back row, so he's really useful in things like the mirror match where there's going to be a lot of back row. He's very good against Blackwings. He can kind of force the Icarus attack if you already have a hero on board, so that's really useful. And the last hero, again, Captain Gold, who can search your deck for Skyscraper by discarding him. You can get your Captain Gold off of any of your search in the deck, including your Stratos, so he's very accessible. We have one Thunder King Ryo. He's not necessary, but I think he's a really powerful tech card. He's really good against the Blackwing matchup and other decks that need to search a lot. And also summoning him on turn 1 sometimes just puts you really far ahead, because a lot of the times your opponent will have to synchro summon to out a lot of your big monsters, and he just kind of says no to the first synchro, so your opponent can't just make Stardust and out everything you have. Again, we have Honest. Honest lets you buff your guys, beat over things by battle, and keep control of the board while also being able to have a big fat booty at 1900. This card allows you to stall for a little while, can also allow you to jab and then add it back to hand so you don't have to waste your cards. A lot of the time you can find yourself having traded down cards a lot throughout the game, like using your Gemini Sparks and your Hero Blast to trade with your opponent's cards until you're kind of both out of cards. And in that type of situation, being able to summon the Honest, attack with it, and then add it back to hand means you can put pressure on without having to like risk your cards and like run out of resources. And we have 2 Cyber Dragons. Cyber Dragon is just one of the best big bodies you could summon in the format. The card's a 2 for a reason. It just puts on a lot of pressure. It's bigger than a lot of your other bodies in your deck, and again, it's a light monster, so you can Honest on it. It's huge, and it just lets you out a lot of stuff. Also, if your opponent's playing some type of machine deck or something, like Gadgets or Morphtronics or something weird like that, you can kind of just make a Chimera Tech with their whole board and just run them over. Of course, we play 3 Gemini Spark. It's our main way to out cards in the deck without having to run out of steam, and it's just a really powerful card for trading with things. There's nothing else to say about this card except that it's just a really high value card and you gotta play 3. We have 3 Miracle Fusion, because again, sometimes you can make miracles happen. You can make a big absolute zero or something else, maybe a Gaia. With Skyscraper in the deck, your Hero Fusions can kind of out anything, but also just having an absolute zero on your board kind of makes it really difficult for your opponent to get through, because you'll have a lot of back row stopping them and an absolute zero blocking their monsters from being able to even attack. Also, between Gemini Spark and just having to play a longer grind of your game in general, you're often going to find yourself with some heroes in your grave that you're probably never really going to touch again, so just banishing them away for a big guy doesn't really hurt you. We play 3 E-Emergency Call and 1 Rhoda, so basically we play 4 Rhoda. E-Emergency Call gets us all of our like main engine between getting Alias to attack and Stratos to search whatever we want, Captain Gold to out things, and Ocean to just recover our resources. It's basically just everything we need in a card, and Reinforcement of the Army just is a 4th E-Emergency Call. We have some back row removal. We have a Heavy Storm and an MST. So we're allowed to play. We could play a True Nade, but it's not really necessary. And we don't really want to put our own back row back to our hand anyway. We just play these cards to out our opponent's stuff. Keep in mind that Gemini Spark also functions as back row removal, so we don't really need Dust Tornadoes or anything else in the main. We play one Future Fusion because this is kind of just free. It forces your opponent to waste their Mystical Space Typhoon or their Heavy Storm early, and if they don't, then you kind of just get everything you want for free while also loading a Miracle Fusion. Being able to establish an absolute 0 early is really big, so if you get to Future Fusion on turn 1, it's huge. Also, if they Giant True Nade it back to hand, you can just activate it again the next turn, which means it gives them more time to out it, yes, but it means you also get to fuel your grave more for more Miracle Fusions or Hero Blasts. And we have one Skyscraper. Again, you can search it with the Captain Gould. It helps you out a lot of things like Stardust Dragon and a lot of other problematic cards for you in the format. It's not the most necessary card in this build. You could play this deck without the Honest and the Skyscrapers and the Captain Gold and play more stun cards like main decking the Fossil Dyna and stuff like that. But I think this build is definitely a lot more fun to play at the very least, but I also think it's just more consistent because you have so many ways to find the Skyscraper. Sometimes I almost want to play a second one, although it's pretty bricky. We have 2 Hero Blasts. You maybe want to play 3, and there is space for a third one in this deck. I could show you where it is, but I just prefer to play 2 because I don't like to have too many cards that can brick. I also like to have more of a variety of back row in my deck because I like to be able to put my opponent in weird situations, but we'll get into that. Also, Hero Blast, like Gemini Spark, is kind of reliant on Alias being in your hand or in your grave for it to be useful, but it's a little bit less activatable than Gemini Spark because you don't get the immediate gratification of getting to use it. You have to wait a turn, and then on top of that, it's kind of easier to get a Neos Alias to hand than it is into your grave, so I don't really think this card is necessary at 3, but again, there is a couple of cards you could cut technically to put it to 3 if you prefer it. We have 2 Royal Oppression. You don't really need to special summon much in this deck, so this card is kind of just broken. Again, your opponents are often going to need to summon big Synchro monsters or other big threats to be able to out your guys, or maybe just a Cyber Dragon. And Royal Oppression and the next card help you with that very much. The next card is going to be Skill Drain. You don't really rely on your monster effects on the field. Like Stratos and Ocean are nice, but a lot of the times you can kind of just have a Skill Drain and a Skyscraper and just beat over them. Also, we all know that sometimes you can just have a big body and a Skill Drain, your opponent just can't do anything, you just win the game. On top of Skill Drain trying to slow down the opponent, we also have another card that's similar to Skill Drain, but I think was actually very underplayed in the format, and I think is underplayed in a lot more decks than just this one, and that's Fiendish Chain. Fiendish Chain I think is mainly underplayed because it came out in Absolute Power Force, which is the last set that was legal in Edison Format right before the event, so I think people didn't really test with it too much, but over time, Fiendish Chain became a really relevant meta threat of a card. Also, if they summon a big Synchro monster and try to out your guys, or to summon a big guy in general to try to out your attackers, you can just Fiendish Chain it, and then next turn, E-Call, Captain Gold, Skyscraper, and now all of a sudden your guy's bigger because of the Skyscraper. Now you have a lead. Or maybe stopping a Stratos in the mirror match to get a little bit of a lead, or stopping a Deep Sea Diva against Diva Heroes or Diva Zombies or one of the other Diva decks to just kind of stunt them on their first turn. I think this is one of the most sleeper cards in Edison Format in general. Next, we have 2-Dimensional Prison. I've actually been seeing a lot of lists running 3 of this card, and I really don't get it. A lot of the times, the only way from your opponent to really out your big guys is to make a bigger guy and attack over them, and alongside of Mirror Force, your opponent's going to have a lot to play around when trying to attack and beat over your stuff, let alone the threat of Honest being in your hand. Not only do you not have to commit a lot to the board, so Torrential Tribute's often very live, but sometimes you can just pop your own Neos Alias and blow up their board with it, and then when they go to establish anything else, you can Hero Blast your Neos Alias and then pop something else. And Mirror Force is just a giant blowout that your opponent kind of has to walk into sometimes. One Judgment, because this card just stops Heavy Storm, and if I could main Starlight Road on top of Judgment, I would, just to be able to have multiple, but we can't really do that. But this card also outs things like Icarus Attack and just big summons that would out our boards, so this card is pretty impactful. There's definitely reason to cut it if you're playing Royal Oppression, because you might feel that you're burning too many life points for yourself. I haven't felt like I've had that issue, because a lot of the times I feel like I can just set the extra card if I don't have enough life points as a bluff, and the opponent kind of still has to play around it anyway. So yeah. But I could see the reasoning in not wanting to put yourself so low, especially if you're going into a tournament environment where there's time in round. So if you don't like Judgment, maybe consider maining Starlight Road to help you deal with things like Icarus Attack and Heavy Storm, or maybe just play more removal like another Bottomless or something, or you could just cut it down to 40 cards. Now the next 2 spots is where I think the deck could be 40 cards, but I kind of don't want to cut either of these cards. I also play 1 Bottomless Trap Hole and 1 Trap Dust Shoot. I like Bottomless Trap Hole for the variance in my back row, and I also kind of like that once I show that I have path one to my opponent kind of then has to play around it for the rest of the game in the set, even though I'm only playing one. And it puts the opponent in an awkward spot where now they have to take suboptimal lines to play around the card's existence now that they know about it. And it also, again, just outs a lot of the big things that this deck can have a problem with, although it doesn't out Stardust Dragon, which is a problem sometimes, which is why maybe you don't need to main deck this card. But also being able to banish some of your opponent's most important cards that they may want to recycle later on in the game is really impactful, and it is really good against things like Blackwings that kind of want to synchro from their grave when they're done with their guy. And the Trap Dust Shoot is another card that's possibly cuttable, but it's one of those cards that I kind of just like to have in my deck. I feel like in the games where I open this card, I'm normally winning the game because I'm putting back their most impactful normal summon or their most impactful starter, and that kind of just gives you a really big tempo swing. And when this deck kind of gets ahead of the opponent, it kind of just runs away with the game because you have so much value out of your cards. It's kind of just hard for your opponent to get through once the wall goes up. It's not necessary, and if you're not really good with playing with hand knowledge and stuff like that, then maybe you don't need it. But also, I think hand knowledge is one of the most impactful things in card games, so if I get to look at your hand, I kind of want to have the ability to do so. And for the extra deck, we have 2 Elemental Hero Gaia. Gaia's really good for outing some big guys, but he's also just a good super poly target, and he's just one of the only fusions you can really make in the deck. You're mainly going to be making him through super poly or through Miracle Fusion post side. 3 Absolute Zero, again, he's like your main extra deck boss monster, although again, this deck doesn't really rely on its extra deck. He's just really powerful. When he's destroyed, he gets to Raigeki the opponent and just destroy all their monsters. He's really powerful, and it makes it really difficult for your opponent to get through your board when you have him and like 2 impactful back row behind him. We have 2 Chimeritic Fortress Dragons, so we can summon our Cyber Dragon and eat our opponent's machine boards, but also we have a Chimeritic Over Dragon, so maybe post side if we have our super poly and the situation comes up, it's nice to have. It's not going to come up very often. Most of the times you're going to be using the Fortress Dragon more, but it's good to have. We have 1 Super Alloy Beast, Raptinus. It's just the Gemini fusion. You get to put 2 aliases together to make him. He doesn't really do anything for you, but he's just like another super poly target, and like he's just decent to have. Maybe if you want a future fusion because you have 2 hero blasts, so you want to send 2 aliases to be able to add them back to hand, it could be an option. It's also pretty useful in the mirror match because you could super poly your alias and your opponents. And 1 5-headed dragon, so if we go into the Disaster Dragon decks or any of the other dragon decks that exist in the format, we can side super poly against them and kind of just eat their whole board away, especially if we found our way to a Raptinus on our board, or maybe we Starlight Road it into a Stardust Dragon. The 5-headed dragon coming out sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes kind of just blows them out of the water with a giant 5k body. They're already struggling to get through the 1900 bodies with all the back row, but now that there's a 5k body in all the back row, it's really ridiculous. Also, if you got it, you probably ate their entire combo board away, meaning they're probably out of cards. We have 1 Cataster, 1 Goyo Guardian, and 1 Black Rose, as they're just the best level 5, 6, and 7 synchros you can maybe go into if you get creature swapped to tuner. We have 2 Stardust Dragons because 2 Starlight Roads, so we're able to summon both, but also just to have the extra Stardust in general, just in case, again, we get creature swapped to tuner, and maybe we have to Starlight Road on top of it. Speaking of Starlight Road, we have 2 Starlight Road. This card's really good to side in the mirror to be able to out Absolute Zeros, or maybe against Diva Heroes, it's good. But also this card's just amazing against Blackwings. It just completely blows Icarus Attack out of the water, and Icarus Attack is probably the most dangerous card in the Blackwing deck against our deck. Also, just being able to negate Heavy Storm sometimes and summon a Stardust for free is really broken. And speaking of back row removal, we have 2 Dust Tornado, just an extra 2 Dust Tornado for the more back row heavy matchups to give us a little bit more favor in the mirror. It also helps against maybe the slower Blackwing versions that are playing more trap cards. This also might help if you play against a weird rogue deck like Gravekeepers or something that relies on a field spell. Having the extra removal for the field spell that they're relying on to get over your board might be really nice. We played 2 Shadow Imprisoning Mirror and 2 Light Imprisoning Mirror. I was playing 3 and 3, but it felt like when I sided in 3 of each, it was really bricky. A lot of the decks in the format really rely on dark effects on the field and grave, and a lot of the other decks that don't rely on light effects on the field and grave. So having these cards kind of just auto win a lot of matchups sometimes. We have 2 Super Poly. Again, the third can kind of get a little bricky, but maybe I'm wrong on that. It's only really good in the mirror match and against maybe Diva Heroes. Again, there's some weird nuanced uses with like 5-headed dragon against the dragon matchup and stuff, but those decks are kind of rare. And as a deck that kind of wants to out-resource your opponent, spending 2 cards to be able to out a guy isn't really always the best way to go. But 2 does prove to be very useful, so I like to have it in the side deck. 2 Soul Release, because you can just activate this against like a Light Sworn player or maybe like a Zombies player and just auto win on the spot. 1 more Thunder King Ryo to side in against Blackwings, and again other decks that like to search, maybe the mirror match to be able to stop e-calls and stuff. Although we're a stunny deck and stunny decks like this card, we're not really a stun deck. We're more of a hero deck that has stun elements, so just having 2 of this card post side is really good. Speaking of stunniness, we do have 2 Fossil Dine in the side deck. Not only does it help you slow down the game against the more aggressive combo decks and blow up their board, but it also lets you make Gaia in matchups where you really want it. There's also some matchups where they want to special summon summon, they only have a lot of small guys. You can kind of decide this in and normal summon it, and they kind of really can't get through you. That's it for Gemini Heroes. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys enjoy getting your game on with your new hero deck that you might not have played before. The stun cards can be a bit much, but I think it's fun overall, especially because it's a anime protagonist deck, and that's always fun. Thank you very much for watching. If you guys liked the video, leave a like, and if you want to see more, subscribe so you can stick around for the next video. If you want a fun online community to be involved in, check out our Discord link below. We have tournaments and just a fun online crew that likes to hang out and play games online. And if you want to be more involved in our community, or you just want some coaching and you want to hang out with some cool guys, check out our coaching program. It's very good and gets you discounted entry on our tournament, so it's very useful. Info for that and all the new sealed product and singles we have will be found on BamaniLounge.com. Check out our website, and we'll see you next time on the lounge.